There was a moment last night at the Azteca that told you everything you need to know about how FIFA is running this World Cup. The storm had already delayed the match by an hour, lightning warnings, torrential rain, fans in ponchos dancing in the stands while officials waited for the weather to clear. And as part of their communication about the delay, FIFA published a statement. It included one specific line that stood out: "No hydration breaks will take place during this match. The safety and security of all individuals is FIFA's priority." That made sense at face value. The match was already delayed, the storm had cooled temperatures in Mexico City, the original justification for mandatory 3-minute stoppages in every match, protecting players from extreme summer heat, simply didn't apply in the same way after a thunderstorm had moved through the Azteca and pushed the kickoff an hour into the evening. So far, so reasonable. Then the match kicked off. 27 minutes in, both teams were directed to their benches. In the 27th minute, a brief reprieve, a hydration break, the exact thing FIFA had announced would not take place during this match. So what's really happening here? Let's break it all down properly. Start with the background, because you need to understand everything that led to last night to appreciate why this moment landed the way it did. Mexico versus Ecuador was a round of 32 match at the Azteca, a venue hosting its third consecutive World Cup and one of football's most atmospheric settings at any volume. Mexico had topped Group A undefeated, winning all 3 matches and entering the knockout stage as one of the form sides in the tournament. Ecuador's story was more remarkable still. They'd lost their opening match to Ivory Coast, drawn with Curaçao, and then beaten Germany 2-1 in their final group game, in one of the biggest upsets of the entire group stage, a result that squeezed them through to the knockout rounds at the very last moment. The rain arrived before kickoff, heavy and persistent, accompanied by lightning in the vicinity of the stadium. FIFA's response was professional and appropriate, pushing the start time back an hour, issuing safety-first statements, and crucially announcing that the match would proceed without the mandatory hydration breaks that have become one of the most talked-about features of this entire tournament. Here's where things get interesting, because FIFA's reasoning for suspending the breaks was implicitly an acknowledgement of something critics have been saying since the very first match of the tournament. The breaks exist, at least in part, as a response to heat. When heat isn't a significant factor, they can be waived. The players on that pitch last night, wearing waterlogged kits after a storm delay, playing in conditions that had been physically cooled by the weather, did not need hydration breaks for heat management. FIFA's own statement effectively confirmed as much, and then the breaks happened anyway. NBC News' live blog captured the moment precisely. They wrote it plainly. Even though FIFA announced before the match that the 1-hour weather delay would lead the game to be played without hydration breaks, Mexico and Ecuador have retreated to their benches in the 27th minute for a brief reprieve. No editorial spin, just an observation. FIFA said no breaks, the break happened. This matters because it isn't an isolated quirk. It's the latest chapter in a controversy that started on the very first day of this tournament and has been building ever since. Go back to June 11, the opening match, Mexico versus South Africa at the Azteca. The hydration break in the second half had players ready to resume play while the Fox Sports broadcast was still showing commercials. Reporter Romain Molina was first to document what happened. Players were told to hold on resuming play because television broadcasts were still running. Some viewers watching at home missed the restart entirely. The players, according to fan accounts shared across social media, eventually resumed anyway, yelling at the referee to let the match continue. The Fox feed missed several seconds of live play as a result. That's not FIFA managing player welfare. That's a referee holding a World Cup match for an American broadcaster's commercial schedule.
Now, here's the thing about the Mexico-Ecuador break specifically. Nobody watching the match could definitively establish why the break happened after FIFA's earlier announcement. Were officials operating on a standing protocol that overrode the specific statement? Was it a miscommunication between FIFA's communications department and the match officials on the ground? Was someone with commercial interests involved in the decision? None of that is publicly confirmed. What is confirmed is the sequence. FIFA said no breaks, break happened. That sequence, in the context of everything that's come before it, is what's generating the outrage. This matters because of how central the commercial advertising question has been to every hydration break controversy since December 2024, when FIFA first announced the policy. At that announcement, FIFA's chief tournament officer Manolo Zuberi confirmed commercial broadcasters would be given the option to show advertisements during the breaks. That confirmation, bundled into the announcement of a player welfare measure, was the origin point for suspicions that have followed every single break since. The policy is specific. Breaks happen at roughly the 22-minute mark of each half. Advertisers can run content during the stoppage. FIFA collects revenue across its broadcast partnerships. Whether those commercial imperatives influence the decision to proceed with a break in Mexico City last night, despite the earlier statement saying no breaks will take place, nobody has said officially. But that's only part of the story, because the backlash has also been driven by what players themselves have said throughout this tournament, and their voices are the hardest to dismiss. Virgil van Dijk argued every game should be judged individually rather than applying a blanket rule. Didier Deschamps described the breaks as splitting the halves, effectively turning the match into 4 quarters rather than 2 halves, a description he offered matter-of-factly rather than as a complaint, but which made clear the structural change was something he'd noticed and had to account for in his coaching approach. Uruguayan head coach Marcelo Bielsa criticized the breaks publicly before his side's match against Cape Verde. And the fan reaction, match after match, has been consistent. AT&T Stadium in Arlington with England versus Croatia, boos when the break arrived under a closed roof with air conditioning running. Atlanta with Czechia versus South Africa, 67,000 fans in the stands, another audible reaction from the crowd when play stopped unnecessarily. The pattern isn't confined to one stadium or one fan base. It's happening everywhere the conditions don't obviously justify stopping the match. Here's the historical comparison that helps understand why this particular controversy cuts deeper than normal pre-tournament complaints. Every World Cup since 1990 has involved some form of commercial television arrangement that shaped how the sport was presented globally. Advertising during halftime, graphics overlaid on broadcast feeds, sponsor branding on penalty run-up zones. These integrations have always generated comment and then been absorbed into how the sport works in the modern world.
The hydration breaks are different in one specific way. They are changes to the rules of the game itself, not additions to the broadcast packaging around it. Football's basic structure, 90 minutes of play divided into 2 halves, is one of the sport's most foundational features. It predates professional leagues, predates international competition, predates broadcast television. The 2-half structure is what the sport is built around. The introduction of mandatory 3-minute stoppages at specific times in every single match, regardless of conditions, changes that fundamental architecture in a way that feels qualitatively different from changing a sponsor logo behind the goal. The Mexico-Ecuador break last night, in a match played after a storm delay, in conditions FIFA itself had decided didn't require breaks, exposes that architecture more starkly than almost any other single incident in the tournament so far. Let's make this human for a moment, because behind the institutional debate there was actual football happening last night that deserved to be the whole story. Mexico won 2-0. Julian Quinones scored in the 22nd minute, a right-footed missile into the near post after staying onside to collect Roberto Alvarado's deep pass, a goal that arrived just as the Azteca was finding its voice, despite the damp weather. Raúl Jiménez added a header later to put the result beyond doubt. The veteran striker's impact in front of his home crowd, exactly the kind of World Cup moment that defines careers. The Azteca had never seen Mexico lose in World Cup play across the 1970, 1986, and now 2026 editions, and that record continues. Ecuador fought, as they fought throughout this entire improbable run. They'd arrived in the round of 32 on the back of beating Germany, one of the tournament's most startling results, and they pushed Mexico hard in moments, with John Yeboah's nutmeg of Cesar Montes creating one of the night's most memorable individual moments. But Mexico were simply better, and the Azteca's energy, audible and sustained despite the wet conditions, made the difference palpable. The football deserved the full attention of everyone watching. The question of whether a hydration break was appropriate last night took some of that attention away, and that theft of focus is part of what makes this controversy matter. So where does this leave things heading into the round of 16? FIFA has not addressed the discrepancy between last night's pre-match statement and what actually happened on the pitch in Mexico City. There has been no formal explanation for why the break proceeded despite the earlier announcement. Given how quickly these matches follow each other in the knockout rounds, any formal response is unlikely to come before the next round of fixtures. What is likely is that this specific incident joins a long list that's been accumulating since June 11th. Opening day, the Fox Sports commercial break overrun, the booing in Dallas and Atlanta, the uniform application of brakes in cooled indoor stadiums where the original justification clearly didn't apply, and now this, a break in a match where FIFA's own pre-match statement had explicitly said none would occur. What do you think? Does this sequence of events, from the opening day Fox Sports incident through to last night's unexplained reversal, represent FIFA losing control of its own hydration policy? Or do you think there's a reasonable explanation for why the statement and the actual match decision diverged? I'd be genuinely curious to hear where you land on this. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this breakdown valuable, a like goes a long way, and subscribing means you'll catch every update as the round of 16 picture takes shape.